After visiting my wife's grave, my neighbor of 15 years stopped me in the driveway. "Richard, don't go inside. They're in there right now. I recorded everything." On her phone, I watched my daughter-in-law and her brother sitting at my kitchen table. I had just come from the cemetery. I go every Sunday. 31 minutes from my front door to Eleanor's grave. I've timed it so many times I stopped noticing I was doing it. I bring whatever is blooming in the garden that week, or if nothing is, I stop at the florist on Mercer Street who knows my name and keeps Ellie's favorites in the back. That Sunday, it was pale yellow dahlias. Ellie grew them along the south fence for 20 years. She would have found the florist arrangement inferior, and she would have been right, but she also would have laughed about it, which is why I keep buying them. I was 40 steps from my front door when Margaret grabbed my arm. Margaret Chen has lived next door for 15 years. She is 71 years old, 5 feet 2, and does not run. She was running. Her reading glasses were pushed up on her forehead, and she was breathing like she'd come from the far end of the yard, which was exactly where she'd come from, and her hand on my arm was tighter than I would have expected. "Don't go in," she said. She was already looking past me toward my windows. "Come to my house, right now." I have known Margaret for 15 years. In that time, I have seen her handle a frozen pipe, a car accident in front of her house, and the afternoon her youngest son told her he was moving to Singapore. She had handled all of those things with an unruffled competence that I had always quietly admired. She was not unruffled now. I followed her without a word. She closed the blinds before she said anything. Kitchen blinds first, then the sitting room. Methodical. Then she sat across from me at her kitchen table, the table where we had shared perhaps 100 cups of coffee over 15 years, and she put her phone between us and looked at me with an expression I recognized from 32 years of medicine. The expression of someone about to deliver information they wish they didn't have. "They've been in there 2 hours, she said. "Your daughter-in-law and a man in a suit. They came with a locksmith, Richard." My stomach went cold. A locksmith. I watched them from the upstairs window. Something felt wrong. I couldn't say what exactly, just wrong, so I recorded it. She touched the phone. "I got your kitchen through the window. The angle isn't perfect, but the audio is clear." She pressed play. My kitchen. My oak table. The one Ellie and I bought at an estate sale in 1987. The one with the coffee ring on the left side that she always said she was going to refinish and never did. Sitting at it, my daughter-in-law Vanessa in her cream coat, with the particular stillness she carries in professional settings, the stillness of someone who is used to being the most prepared person in any room. Across from her, a man I recognized after a moment as her brother Gregory, estate attorney. I had met him at a family dinner 2 years ago, and again at Daniel and Vanessa's anniversary party last spring. Both times he had been pleasant in the smooth, surface way of people who are always calculating. I had not liked him. I had told myself that was an unfair instinct and set it aside. I should have listened to it. Vanessa's voice through the phone speaker, cold and brisk. "How long until the conservatorship is finalized?" Gregory, settling back in my chair with the ease of a man who has just inherited something. 3 weeks if we file tomorrow. The doctor's report helps. Once a judge sees he's been forgetting things, acting erratic, he hasn't been acting erratic. The report says otherwise. A smile. "Dr. Morrison owes me a favor. Already signed. Moderate cognitive decline. Supervised care recommended. There is a thing that happens occasionally in surgery. A moment where you are working and you identify something that reframes everything you thought you were looking at. Not a surprise exactly. More like a correction. Everything shifts 2 degrees, and suddenly the picture is different and you can't unsee it. That is what happened in Margaret's kitchen." Vanessa. "And the house?" Gregory. "Once you're conservator, the house, the investments, the trust, all of it. And Daniel? His share stays locked until he's 30. By the time he figures out what happened, it'll be too late. My grandson Daniel is 24. I watched Vanessa smile. The same smile she had given me at Thanksgiving when she reached across the table and squeezed my hand and called me Dad. Margaret stopped the video. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a car passed on the street. Somewhere a bird. The ordinary sounds of a Sunday afternoon arranged around a silence that had a shape to it. "I made 3 copies, Margaret said quietly. "Different drives, just in case." I looked at the phone on the table. Then I looked at my hands. The hands of a cardiovascular surgeon, 32 years of practice. Hands that had been inside people's chests and held their hearts and known, always, what the difference was between something that could be fixed and something that couldn't. "Why are you doing this?" I said. "Helping me." Her eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen from her in a long time. She reached across and put her hand over mine. 15 years ago, she said, when Michael had his stroke. 2 in the morning, middle of February, and I was sitting in that waiting room alone and terrified and not a nurse to be seen. And you came in, still in your coat, still with your car keys. And you weren't on call. You weren't even at that hospital. You just came. You sat with me for 6 hours, I remembered. I had been driving past on the way home from a late case. I had seen her car in the lot, her particular green Subaru, and I had pulled in. 6 hours in a waiting room chair with a cup of bad coffee, and a woman I barely knew yet, because she looked like she needed someone. "Some debts," Margaret said. "You don't forget, I am 70 years old. I want to say that plainly, not defensively, because this entire story turns on it. 70 years old, recently widowed. Ellie died 14 months ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. And I have been told by people who who assess such things professionally, of entirely sound mind. I read. I operate still as a consultant. I garden. I manage my own finances. Always have, always will. I forget where I put my keys sometimes. I call my grandson by my son's name occasionally because my son Robert died 8 years ago, and I still catch myself reaching for him, and Daniel has Robert's voice. These are the things that grief does. They are not the things that cognitive decline does, and any competent physician can tell the difference. The difference is what Vanessa and Gregory were counting on a judge not examining too closely. I need to tell you about Vanessa, because she is not simply a villain in a simple story, and I think the truth of it matters more than an easy version. Vanessa married my son Robert when they were both 28. Beautiful, sharp, driven in the way of someone who grew up without resources and built everything herself. I had respected that about her, still do, in a compartmentalized way. Robert loved her, and she loved Robert, and I believe that was real. When Robert died, a pulmonary embolism, sudden, while he was at the gym on a Tuesday morning, Vanessa was 36 years old with a child to raise, and a grief she handled with the same controlled efficiency she applied to everything else. She moved forward. She built a career in real estate development. She was in most visible ways exactly the daughter-in-law I could have hoped for. What I did not account for, the $4.2 million, my estate. The house I built with my career, the investments I had managed carefully for 40 years, the trust Ellie and I had set up to pass properly to Daniel. I had never hidden any of this from family. That was not my way. And so Vanessa had always known the approximate shape of it, the way you know a landscape you see every day without calculating its exact dimensions. After Ellie died, I think the landscape started looking like something different to her. I don't know precisely when she brought Gregory into it. I don't know how long the plan had been developing. What I know is what Margaret's camera showed me and what the cameras I installed afterward recorded, and that is enough. I did not go home that night. Margaret offered her guest room. I thanked her and declined, because I needed to think without the weight of anyone's presence, even a kind one. I drove to the Marriott near the airport, paid cash, gave a name that was not mine at the front desk, which produced no difficulty because I am a 70-year-old man in a good coat, and no one scrutinizes 70-year-old men in good coats. I sat on the edge of the bed in room 314, and I did not turn on the television, and I did not call anyone for 45 minutes. I thought about Eleanor, about the way she approached problems, calmly, completely, without the noise of ego interfering with the work. She had been a better strategic thinker than me in most respects. I had always known this. I had sometimes wondered if she knew I knew. I thought, what would Ellie do? She would build the case first. She would not confront until she had everything. I picked up my phone. My first call was to Dr. Patricia Newton. Patricia Newton, MD, PhD. It was a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist with 20 years of practice, who I had known professionally since we were both fellows at the same hospital in the 90s. She is one of the most rigorous cognitive assessment physicians in the Pacific Northwest, and more relevantly, she is the specific sort of person who becomes angry when she hears that a colleague has signed a fraudulent medical report. I called her at 9:15 p.m., and she answered because she always answers, and I explained the situation in the language we both spoke. Precise, clinical, without decoration. She said, I can see you first thing tomorrow. Full evaluation. 4 hours. You'll have the report the same day. I said, thank you. She said, Morrison. Which Morrison? I told her. There was a pause. Then she said something under her breath that I won't reproduce here, and she said she'd see me at 8 a.m. My second call was to Thomas Reeves. Thomas Reeves has been my attorney for 25 years. He is 63, steady and methodical in the way of someone who learned early that the law rewards patience. And he is the kind of man who, when you call him at 9:30 on a Sunday evening with a situation of genuine complexity, says go ahead and means it. I talked for 12 minutes. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he said, what you're describing is elder abuse, medical fraud, and document forgery. The conservatorship filing alone, if it contains a fraudulent medical report, is a felony in this state. How long do we need? 2 weeks to build something solid. If you can get me the camera footage Margaret has, and if we can get comparative medical documentation. Dr. Newton is evaluating me tomorrow. Full workup. A pause. Richard, are you all right? I thought about Ellie's grave with the yellow dahlias, about the oak table, about Vanessa's voice. He's been forgetting things, acting erratic, precise and cold. I will be, I said. Let me build this first. He said, 2 weeks. At 3 a.m., I drove back to my house. The locksmith they had used had changed the front and back locks. I have a background in building and renovation that my daughter-in-law had no reason to know about, and I have kept, since the 90s, a locksmith contact who has done work for me and for several of my colleagues over the years. I called him at a number I had memorized. He arrived at 3:20 a.m. with the discretion of a professional who has learned not to ask questions about hours, and by 3:45 a.m., I was back in my own house with new locks that only I had keys to. Then I installed the cameras, 4 of them. Reolink models, wireless, feeding to an encrypted NAS server in the garage crawl space where they would not be found by anyone who didn't know to look. I positioned them for audio as well as video, one covering the kitchen and the dining room, one in the hallway, one in the sitting room, one with a view of the front entry. I had the system streaming streaming to an app on my phone within 2 hours. I went back to the hotel before dawn. I watched my own living room from room 314. The footage from the first day, nothing. Vanessa tried her new key at 10:15 a.m. and found it didn't work. I watched her try it 3 times, then stand on my front porch and look at the door with an expression I had never seen on her before. Not the composed professional face, not the warm daughter-in-law face, but something much older and less managed. A flash of calculation working out what the dead key meant. She called someone. Gregory, I assumed. Then she left. Day 2. Vanessa's voice on the phone in my kitchen. Clearly not knowing I had given her access through the back window I had deliberately left unlocked because I wanted to see what she did when she got in. He hasn't come home. Do you think he figured it out? And Gregory's voice through the speaker. Comfortable and dismissive. Impossible. The old man doesn't suspect a thing. The old man. I am a retired cardiovascular surgeon with 3 decades of practice, a published researcher, and a man who has been navigating difficult information his entire professional life. I sat in room 314 at 8:47 p.m. watching this on my phone and I thought, the old man. I saved the clip. I backed it up in 3 locations. I sent a copy to Thomas Reeves. His text back, Exhibit C. Good evening, Richard. Day 8. Both of them in my sitting room. Drinks poured. My scotch I noticed from the cabinet above the refrigerator. Gregory's voice. How much is the estate worth? And Vanessa, precisely, 4.2 million, including the house. Gregory. And my cut? Vanessa. 30%, like we agreed. Gregory raised the glass. Not bad, he said, for a few forged signatures and a confused old man. I watched him take a sip of my scotch. I noted the timestamp. I saved the clip. I sent it to Reeves. His response arrived 11 minutes later with a single word. Perfect. Dr. Newton's evaluation report ran 19 pages. She assessed language function, executive function, memory, processing speed, visuospatial ability, and emotional regulation across a 4-hour session that I found, honestly, somewhat tedious but not difficult. At the end of it, she walked me through the results with the directness I had always appreciated in her, then sat back and looked at me. Your scores are in the 91st percentile for your age cohort, she said. Across all domains, she paused. Whoever signed the Morrison report was either catastrophically incompetent or committed fraud. Based on what you've described, I know which. She submitted her formal assessment to Reeves as Exhibit A. She also filed a formal complaint against Dr. Morrison's medical license with the state licensing board, which is not something I had asked her to do, and which she did entirely on her own professional judgment. He used my field to enable the abuse of a patient, she said when I asked. That's not something I'm able to let pass. The licensing board investigation began within 5 days. Meanwhile, Reeves had identified 3 separate legal violations in the conservatorship filing Gregory had prepared. The fraudulent medical documentation was the most obvious, but there were 2 others: a misrepresentation of my financial competency based on fabricated documentation, and an undisclosed conflict of interest in the court filing. Gregory had not disclosed his relationship to the petitioner, which in conservatorship proceedings is required. 3 independent grounds for dismissal, 3 separate felonies in various stages of commission. We could move now, Reeves told me on day 11. We have enough. Not yet, I said. I want the conversation about the split on record. I want Gregory explicitly on camera agreeing to the fraud. Richard, 2 more days. He let out a breath. 2 more days. I called Daniel on day 13. Daniel is 24 years old, Robert's son, built like his father, but with Vanessa's precision and Robert's warmth mixed in a way that made him, from the moment he was born, the most essentially decent person I have ever known. He is in his 2nd year of graduate school, studying environmental engineering, living in the apartment I helped him furnish when he started. He calls me every Sunday evening, and he calls me grandpa in the slightly formal way of a young man who was raised by parents who valued formality, and when I call him out of the blue on a weekday afternoon and ask him to come over, he comes. He arrived 40 minutes later, looking nervous in the way he always looked nervous when he suspected something was wrong with me. The careful eyes, the way he stood slightly closer than necessary. He is the kind of person who has always been attentive to people he loves and doesn't quite know what to do with the attentiveness. I sat him down. I put the tablet on the table between us. I pressed play. I watched his face. I have delivered difficult news to families my entire career. I have sat across from spouses and parents and children and told them things that changed their lives in a single sentence, and I have learned to read what happens to a face when something arrives that it cannot immediately process. Daniel's face went through it in stages. First confusion because he was hearing his mother's voice, and his mother's voice was saying things that did not fit into the category of his mother, and then something that was trying to be disbelief but kept running into the clarity of what he was hearing, and then the collapse. He couldn't look at me when it ended. I didn't know, he said. His voice was wrecked. I swear to you, Grandpa, I didn't know any of it. I know, I said, and I did. I had watched 14 days of footage. Daniel appeared in none of it. The conservatorship, she's filing it to take... He stopped. Tried again. She was going to lock me out until I was 30. She was going to take everything and I wouldn't even... Yes. He put his face in his hands. I let him be there for a moment. Then I said, Daniel, I need something from you. He looked up. Go home. Act normally. Let her believe nothing has changed and I am still the confused old man who hasn't come home and doesn't know what she's doing. I looked at him steadily. Can you do that? He wiped his face with the back of his hand. The jaw went tight. Robert's jaw, the same set Robert had when he had made a decision. Yes, he said. Tomorrow night, I said, your mother is going to walk into my living room. She's going to expect to find a disoriented old man with no resources and nowhere to turn. I paused. Instead, she will find my attorney, a detective from Seattle PD, and a television playing the last 14 days of her conversations in my house. Daniel stared at me. Grandpa. His voice had changed. A different register. Something between awe and the particular feeling of realizing someone you love is not who you thought they were, in a better direction than you expected. How long have you known? I picked up my phone and showed him the first camera alert. Time-stamped the afternoon they changed my locks. Less than 4 hours after I sat in Margaret's kitchen and watched the video. From the beginning, I said, I have been letting them construct the case against themselves. He was quiet for a long moment. Does she suspect anything? I looked at my phone. Vanessa had texted me that morning. Warm, careful, the daughter-in-law voice. Richard, we haven't heard from you. Are you all right? Daniel and I are worried. I turned the screen toward him. She just asked if I'm okay, I said. Detective Carolyn Haas has been with Seattle PD's Financial Crimes Unit for 11 years. She was assigned to the case after Reeves made the formal report and had spent 4 days reviewing the evidence before she called me. She was 43, unhurried, and she had a quality I recognized from my own practice, the ability to be in possession of very significant information without wearing it on her face. Mr. Hargrove, she said, on our second call, I want to be transparent with you. The documentation you've provided, combined with Dr. Newton's assessment and the camera footage, is sufficient to open formal criminal investigation. The conservatorship filing is fraudulent, the medical report is fraudulent, and the recorded conversations constitute admissible evidence of conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, which in this state is a felony with enhanced sentencing. Both subjects are exposed. Gregory as well. Gregory Marsh is exposed to greater liability in some respects than your daughter-in-law. He is a licensed attorney. The ethical violations compound the criminal ones. The Bar Association has already been notified. I thought about that for a moment. Gregory, who had sat in my chair and drunk my scotch and called me a confused old man. I'd like to be present, I said, when they're confronted. Haas was quiet for a moment. That's unusual. I understand. But this is my home, and this is my life, and I have arranged with some care for this moment to occur in a controlled setting. I am not asking to conduct the confrontation. I am asking to be in the room. Another pause. We'll position 2 officers at the exits before they arrive, she said. You and Mr. Reeves will be present, but you will let me lead. If the situation changes, you follow my direction immediately. Understood. And Mr. Hargrove, the footage will play on the television as you described from the moment they enter the room. A beat of silence. Then, professionally, all right, I want to tell you the confrontation was dramatic, clean, that Vanessa walked in and looked at the screen and the mask fell and the truth came out in a rush of admission. It wasn't quite like that. She came in at 7:15 p.m. Gregory was with her. I had arranged through Daniel for him to be there, a casual suggestion to Vanessa that she might want Gregory's legal guidance, given that Richard has been behaving strangely. They both walked in with the composed ease of people who believe they are in control of the situation. The television was already playing. Day 2 footage. Vanessa's voice through the speakers of my own living room television. He hasn't come home. Do you think he figured it out? Gregory's laugh. Impossible. The old man doesn't suspect a thing. Vanessa stopped walking. It is one of the more significant things I have witnessed in a life that has included many significant things. The exact moment a person understands that the ground they have been standing on does not exist. She went very still. Her eyes moved from the television to me, to Reeves, to Haas, who stepped forward then, badge in hand, with the unhurried authority of someone who has done this many times. Gregory took a step back toward the door. The officer positioned there said quietly, Sir? Gregory stopped. Vanessa Hargrove, Haas said. I am Detective Haas with Seattle PD Financial Crimes. You are being detained for questioning in connection with fraudulent conservatorship filing, conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, and document forgery. You have the right to remain silent. I had expected, I think, something explosive. The full exposure of the person I had not known was there. What I got instead was something smaller and more terrible. Vanessa looked at me, not calculating, not performing, just looked at me, with an expression I had not seen on her face in 8 years of knowing her, which was the expression of someone who is standing in a thing they built and watching it come down. I needed to protect Daniel, she said. Her voice was even, still controlled, even now. After Robert died, the estate was always going to go to you and then to him, and I was just adjacent to it, always adjacent. I built a life, and I was still just, you could have talked to me, I said. She looked down at the floor. I know, she said quietly. I know that. It is the only moment in this entire story that I have not been able to fully process, and I say that honestly. Whatever else she was, and whatever she did, and whatever the next chapter of her legal life looked like, in that moment, I believed her. Not as an excuse, not as a reason to change what was happening, but as a human truth. She had been afraid, and afraid people do not always do the thing that makes sense. Robert would have been heartbroken. Gregory, for the record, said nothing at all. He asked for his attorney before Haas had finished the Miranda warning. Here is what followed in the direct sequence. Gregory Marsh, JD, was charged with 4 counts: conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, filing a fraudulent legal document, suborning perjury in the fraudulent medical report, and professional misconduct. He surrendered his law license during the proceedings rather than face disbarment. He accepted a plea agreement that included 32 months in a state correctional facility and 5 years of supervised release. Vanessa Hargrove was charged with 3 counts: conspiracy to commit elder financial abuse, filing a fraudulent conservatorship petition, and first-degree forgery in connection with the insurance policy modification. A discovery: Reeves's financial review had turned up in week 2. She did not take a plea. She went to trial. The jury took 11 hours. She was convicted on 2 of the 3 counts and sentenced to 14 months with 3 years of supervised probation and permanent removal from any trustee or conservator role. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license. The state licensing board moved quickly once Newton's formal complaint was combined with Haas's investigation. His practice was closed by the end of the year. The conservatorship petition was dismissed with prejudice. Daniel was there for all of it. Every hearing, every filing, every date. He sat beside me in the courtroom, and he did not look away from his mother, even when it was hard, which it was, every time. He has Robert's quality that way, the willingness to be present for difficult things instead of protecting himself from them. When the verdict came down, he put his hand on mine and he didn't say anything, which was exactly right. He is living in the house now, in the upstairs room that was his father's as a boy. He is finishing his degree. He comes home for dinner on Tuesdays and sometimes Thursdays, and on Sundays we both go to the cemetery. Robert's grave is 30 meters from Eleanor's, and we stand there for a while in the way of people who have learned that grief does not require any particular activity. Margaret and I have coffee every Wednesday morning. We have done this since all of it ended. It started as a check-in and became a habit, and is now simply the thing we do. She is, at 71, one of the sharpest people I know, and she has a dry wit that Ellie would have appreciated enormously. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if she had not been at her upstairs window that afternoon, if she had not felt the thing that felt wrong, if she had let her curtain fall. I have thought honestly about what my life would have looked like from the other side of a fraudulent conservatorship, trapped in the architecture of a lie about my own mind, stripped of my house and my trust and my freedom by 2 people eating my food and calling me dad, while Daniel waited, unknowing, a decade away. I have thought about it. I do not spend long with it, because here is the truth. They had assessed me and concluded I was manageable, that my age was a vulnerability, that my grief over Eleanor was a lever, that a confused old man would not look carefully, would not build quietly, would not know how to dismantle a thing that had been built against him. They were 32 years of surgery and 50 years of careful attention wrong. I visited Ellie last Sunday. Yellow dahlias from the florist on Mercer Street. I told her what happened, all of it. She would have had opinions. About Vanessa, about Daniel, about my methodology. She always said I was too methodical, that I turned everything into a procedure. She would have said that, and then she would have admitted the procedure worked, and we would have argued pleasantly about it for 45 minutes over dinner. I miss her, but I know what she would have said about all of it in the end. She would have said, "You paid attention." She would have said, "That's what you've always done." She would have been right.